Welcome to another edition of Thermal Wisdom. My name is Bob Lennon, President of ThermalWood Canada and host for the show. And today we're going to be talking about ebony and a real wood alternative called Obsidian Ebony. It's not obsidian and it's not ebony. It's a real wood alternative to it. A little bit of a background story around it. Ebony is used extensively for fingerboards on guitars or stringed instruments, violins, guitars, mandolins, all those types of stringed instruments. And it's on the extinct species list. Why? Because there's very little of it left. It's been cut down extensively, deforestation across the continents, and there's very little of it left. And the amount that is left for the ones that have to purchase it for the guitars that they're building, and if they're buying in very large numbers, the administrative work and the paperwork that's got to be done around that is quite substantial. So years ago, when we embarked on the music world, one of the things we heard from the customers was the fact that they needed to figure out ways of getting around ebony and if there was anything else out there that they could work with. And we were asked all kinds of questions, like, could you really cook this that's so black that it would kind of replace? But the problem was is that when we cooked it to the nth degree, it became very, very brittle, and all we had to do was just snap it in place. So over the years, we've started looking at how we could work together and figure things out, and we came up with a product called Obsidian Ebony. Now, Obsidian Ebony is thermally modified maple that we then put into a pressure vessel. We introduce resins, a concoction of different resins together that we actually induce into the wood under pressure. Once it's been completely immersed and filled with resins, then we take it out and then we cure all the resins in place. So 3-step process. Now, in that process, we can do a number of things. We can change a color. In this particular case, we're trying to reproduce ebony, so we wanted black, but we can do different colors in there. We've done blues in the past. We've done clears in the past. We've done some pink ones that looks a little bit like rosewood. So there's different ones you can do. An example of one that this is a Telly that was built by Fender for us, and in this particular one, the fingerboard actually matches the color of the body of the guitar, and this is actually blue. What happens too, and something to think about when you're on your build, is that if you use a lighter color than black, you'll be able to see any of the grains of the wood underneath. So in this particular case, this is a curly maple fingerboard, and you can see the curl in the fingerboard itself. We did get a bass guitar built by Music Band, and in that one we had a clear, and in the clear you can see the bird's eye all the way through it. If you use black, it covers everything up and you're not going to see anything else. So that's also something that can be considered and something that we're willing to work with you to be able to get those grains and showing what we have. Bringing it back again to the story behind it and where we went. Now, your next question will be as well, why obsidian and why ebony? Well, the fact that it was obsidian, and we're trying to figure out a name, so we got together the whole team and started doing a little bit of a brainstorming exercise. And what came out of this was that obsidian is very black-like. When it's polished up, it's very, very shiny. But on the other side of it is, it's got some mystical healing properties. And obsidian comes from the ground. It's a volcanic lava that comes up, and once it cools down, it turns to black. You don't find it all the time, but you find some places that it's pretty black. And so taking that and thinking about the mystical healing properties, that's when we started thinking about what's more healing than playing a musical instrument and music and playing guitar or playing violin. And so there was a good match. The ebony part is that that's what we're trying to resemble. We're trying to have a real wood alternative that looks like ebony. Now, testing that's been done, we've done some of the own testing that we've been doing here in the facility is looking at color. And color-wise, the tools that we've done, we've been able to match the color. So black for black, it's black, and in some cases, it may be a little bit blacker than the real ebony that's out there. Another thing that happens too is that a lot of ebony now that's left is not pure black. So the purer the black ebony that you get, the higher the cost is going to be, because the lower stuff that's blotched and streaky, well, that comes at a lower cost, and not everybody is ready to have that for their instruments. We've been talking to luthiers, we've been talking to different people out there, and the ones that have used this and tried it out have found that it works just as good as ebony. You can cut through it with a CNC machine. You got to be a little bit careful on the speed that you feed it through. The speed that the equipment turns is not to be considered, not a problem whatsoever, but it's the speed that you feed it. If you feed it too fast, there's going to be some chip outs, so you got to be careful of that part of the equation. So we can make fingerboards, and we have them in stock. We have fingerboards for guitars, bass guitars, regular guitars. We have headstocks. We've got bridge blanks. We also have fingerboards. Well, that's a good one down there. We won't worry about that one. So we've got fingerboards for cellos, violins, and violas that are also available. These are all the rough stock pieces that we have. So we don't do the radius. And what we're doing is we're selling the length, the width, and the thickness of the boards. And like I mentioned a while ago, we can play around with, these are standard sizes, but we can also play around with some custom sizes depending on what you're building. So ask us, we'll be able to figure it out on what we can do. So that's important. The other part is thinking about sustainability. The sustainability part about this is that cutting down the ebony trees that take millions of years to grow, that is not a sustainable practice. And that's why we've come up with this, to be able to resolve that problem. And so this is made with sustainable maple that's found in the eastern seaboard, in New Brunswick, Quebec, Ontario, down in Indiana, Pennsylvania, New York. There's a lot of maple in there, and there's all kinds of it. So it's very, very sustainable going through. The other part about this is that our whole process is a green process. We thermally modify, it's green. The other part you might be considering is the fact the different resins that we use might have some issues about them. Once we've gone and cured the resins in place, there are absolutely no VOCs. We've tested it all. The only thing that you have to use is wear a dust mask, because there's a fine, fine dust that comes off of this after you've been sanding or carving it to get your radius, or cutting the fretboard lines. You need to be able to take that into consideration. So wear a mask when you're doing it. And that's got nothing to do with the fact that there might be VOCs in this. It's got to do with the very fine dust, and it gets into your respiratory system. So just be careful about that. So any of the feedback that we've got so far have been very, very positive. One that probably worthwhile mentioning is that you're going to get a little bit of a smell. This does not smell like wood. What it will smell like when you start to cut through it with a CNC machine, or even sanding it or whatever, is that if you're heating this up, then all of a sudden you're going to get a fiberglass smell a little bit that'll dissipate very, very quickly. It doesn't even smell in the wood when you're using it. It did at first, but we've worked our way through that and got rid of that part. But that's what's happening. You're actually working through the resins, and you soften up those resins, and that's where the smell comes from, but it doesn't last very long. So we've talked mostly here about using this for musical instruments, but what's come out of this that we hadn't really thought about in the past is that there's a lot of people that are out there that are building furniture. They're looking for accents. They're looking for plugs. They're looking for streaks and lines and layers that are very black in between if they're laminating things together. Obsidian Ebony will work for that too. The other part that has come into some conversation is that there's a lot of older buildings and older furniture, especially in Europe, that were made of ebony in the first place. And now they've deteriorated to a point that there's certain parts that need to be replaced. This, again, is a great product to be able to use. Density-wise on this, it's about half of what ebony is. So got to take that into consideration, but is much higher than natural maple that it comes at. So thinking about those points. So you've stepped up that notch as you go through on its hardness. That's mostly everything. If you have any questions to ask about the Obsidian Ebony, just give us a call, send us an email, and we'll be able to answer any questions that you have. There we have it, another edition of Thermal Wisdom for this month.